listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Joni.
And we're your hosts.
This week on the podcast, we talked to Abbigail Rosewood, a debut author whose novel If I Had Two Lives came out in November of 2019 in Canada and a little earlier in the US. It's a beautiful novel. It follows a young woman's early life in Vietnam, her later life as an immigrant in the US, and the personal journey that she takes when a tragedy forces her to go back home to Vietnam.
So Abbigail talked to us about her publishing journey and why she decided actually to pursue an MFA in creative writing. She offered advice to writers who may be interested in getting an MFA and if a program like this would be right for them. So without further ado, here is the interview. Thank you, Abbigail, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So just before we get into it, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started writing and kind of pursued publishing?
Hi, my name is Abbigail Rosewood. So I'm originally from Vietnam. I was born there and I came to the US, I think about 15 years ago. And I think I just really fell in love with the English language. I don't know precisely when the desire to write or to become a writer really solidified, because I didn't really realize for a long time that it was an option. But I've always, kind of experimented. And I guess I figured out that I was able to feel things by writing them more in retrospect rather than just things happening in the moment. And yeah, so that's how I came to writing. And then also, learning to love to read.
Did you always write in English?
Yes.
That's incredible. I studied languages at university because I also love language and love studying it. But to be able to write the way that you do in a second language is incredible to me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I left Vietnam at around 12 years old. So I actually can't really communicate very sophisticated thoughts in Vietnamese. I can have very conversational in Vietnamese, but I can't talk, about politics or philosophy or religion in Vietnamese, but I can do so in English because I learned all those things in English.
Okay, that makes sense. If you were speaking Vietnamese before 12, then you probably weren't discussing politics then.
No.
So your debut novel, If I Had Two Lives, publishes, I think, next week in Canada. So I was just wondering, where did you find your inspiration for your first novel?
Actually, could you tell us a little bit about your novel and give our listeners some background?
So If I Had Two Lives, published in the US from Europe Editions in April. So it is inspired by my childhood that was spent in a lot of isolation and in a sort of in and out of military barrack. And it was inspired by kind of the female friendships that I have encountered and had in my life, really intense friendships. So the novel really reflects those elements, growing up in a military barrack, what is that like? And going through that with another young girl of around the same age. And then the character later moves to the United States, and she would keep searching for basically her friend again, but in other people. So she would keep falling in love with the same people over and over again because she's searching for the people of her childhood. And then so she gets entangled with, a married woman. And so that's sort of the synopsis.
And how much of it is biographical? Did you grow up on a military base also?
So I didn't I spent a lot of time there. My mother was a political dissident. And so there was a lot of mystery in my childhood that I still don't fully grasp or just don't have access to understanding. And part of that is why I wrote fiction, a fictional story, because I felt like fiction gave me the chance to fill in a lot of those gaps and kind of give myself conclusions. And also the creative freedom,
Yeah, I can see that. How did you decide to write this novel? How long did it take you?
So I started it in my last semester in my MFA program at Columbia University. And I wrote about the first 30 pages came out very quickly. I think in a week, because I think I had been trying to tell the story for so long. And then we had to submit stuff for workshop. And so I did that. And I think it was just at that point, it was not ready to be seen by anyone. Mm-hmm. And so the process of workshopping really kind of hindered me. So I kind of put it aside and stopped working on it for a while. And then I came back to it in the summer. The first draft was only like 170 something pages, but I finished the first draft probably in like one summer. And then the editing process took a long time. It was maybe a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you think other writers can find inspiration for a novel they're working on?
I think inspirations are everywhere, but I feel like for literary fiction, I think your inspiration is probably from the things that cause you the most pain. And so by being like, I think the first thing a writer that wants to write literary fiction should do is be honest with themselves and try to confront what is the thing that caused them the most pain. And then from that, you only just need the seed of those feelings and it will just start to grow from there.
I was just wondering more on like the business side. So how did you approach getting published? Did you get an agent? Did you query publishers, or how did you go about doing it?
Sure. Yeah. So I sent our query. Yeah, I did query to multiple agents. I probably query over 50 agents. And then I also went to like author agent speed dating at the new school. And that's actually where I met my current agent. So I queried her after having met her in person, and she actually sent back like, oh, I'm kind of too busy to get to your book right now. I'll get to it in a couple of months, but I will get to it. But then I got an offer representation from someone else pretty quickly, and so I told her about it. And after that, she got back to me. Or she was, I guess that's how they do it. They bump it up once you get an offer representation. Mm-hmm. And then we met and, she just understood my vision so well. And I felt like she really understood what I was trying to say and my work. And she was only a couple of years older than me. And I feel like she was somebody that I would like to grow with in terms of my career. Like, I don't want to be changing agents. I wanted somebody that's there for the long run. And I also wanted an equal partner that I wasn't afraid to like speak up to. And yeah, so that's how I met my agent.
Yeah, to be able to develop a rapport with someone that you're working with, especially if you're trusting that person with your novel, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because I had an offer from one agent that was much older than me, and her style was she was a business person. She was very intimidating, or I found her intimidating. And so I knew from the beginning that I would always kind of be afraid to speak up to her, and it wouldn't work out well.
Well, it's good that you found someone that you meshed well with. I'm curious about how you found the editorial process. A lot of our authors who write independent have to do that part by themselves, and they look for their own editors, and they have to find somebody that they mesh well with in that respect. How was that for you working with a publishing house?
So I actually found this to be surprising too. With a publishing house, like they didn't do that much edit. So most of my edits happen with friends and people that, other writers, that I met throughout the years and, were generous enough to give. But like once it got to that stage, I think a lot of times nowadays publishers, they just want a polished manuscript. Mm-hmm. So by the time it gets to that level, this is just my experience. I know other authors have had more editorial relationship with their publishers, but with me, it was just like I had to cut 10 pages and it was just a straight, clean cut. And then everything else was kind of kept the way it was.
Yeah, it must have been super clean. So you obviously have an author community that you work with and that you give feedback to each other. Was that via your MFA program? How did you find your community?
Yes. So I met a lot of my readers, very like good friends from the MFA program. And so usually, with the first draft, I would give it to one person, and the second draft would be a different one so that nobody gets tired of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think I went to 4 different friends for each draft, and they were all very, very helpful to my process. Yeah.
That's great. That's so valuable to have that kind of support.
Yeah, very important, I think, because you're so alone in this journey already. And I think what a lot of times with writers is that like a lot of writers feel too vulnerable to share their work because of how much feedback can hurt when you hear them. But I kind of learned over the years that you have to learn to become really vulnerable and to just share work with friends, because that is how you build a relationship and a community too.
I just remember, I think it was like my freshman year of university, I took a writing class, and like having to give it to everyone in the class and they would read it in front of you was like a lot to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, very painful process, I think. It's not easy.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, the writer's life can be quite solitary and isolating. How do you combat that? Like, do you use social media a lot, or do you go to writer events? What are the ways that you find to engage with other people doing what you're doing?
I do try to go to like book events, and I live in New York. I live in Brooklyn, but in New York there's many events. I guess I just try to meet with somebody that's also writers, like at least once a month, just somebody that understands like what you need to prioritize. And then right now I'm in this writing group with 4 other women, and it's a woman only writing group, and it has really made a difference for me, because I kind of realized that, I don't know, I think women are just more compassionate readers, and I think like that kind of atmosphere just works best for me. Yeah,
You find it to be more nurturing.
And yes, exactly. And I feel like we generally, and we ask, like before we send in each piece, the writer would tell the group what kind of feedback they're looking for. Like somebody would say, oh, I'm not looking for feedback, I just want to talk about what I'm working on. And somebody would say, oh, I'm looking for anything like you can like tear it apart, and I'm ready for that.
Okay.
So we give them exactly what they need, and so it's helpful.
So it's sort of a safe space then. People know
absolutely.
what they're expecting. Yeah. We were watching your book trailer, which is beautifully done.
Beautiful.
We wondered what your involvement was with that, and anything you can tell us about what that was like to work on.
Sure. So the book trailer was actually directed by my sister, Ash Mayfair. Yeah, so she is a movie director, and her first feature debuted this year, also around the same time as my book. So it was just really serendipitous. And, she read the novel when it came out, and she just really fell in love with my book. And so it was just her gift to me. Yeah, it was just very generous, and it was like a collaboration between us. Yeah. That's how it came about.
I assumed it was your publishing house that had organized it. Did you work with her on it, or did she take it and make it her interpretation of what she'd read?
It was like we talked about the process. We talked about like the casting, and but I also really trust like her taste, and because I've seen her movies, and we share a lot of similar tastes and preferences. So I kind of just let her do her directing, and I was there on set for the first day of filming. It took 3 days to film. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. It made me realize how difficult it is to make a movie, because like it's like a 5-minute trailer, and it's so much work. Yeah, it took months and months. Thank you.
Yeah. And in a book trailer, I imagine it's quite difficult to conceptualize, because you want to get across something about the story without giving too much away. It's actually a very challenging thing to do.
I agree. Like, I think there are a lot of book trailers out there that end up making the book look worse. Like, they're just really hard to do, book trailers. But I'm grateful that she did an amazing job with it.
And where can we find more of your sister's work? Does she have anything that we can share?
Yeah, so her movie is now available on Amazon Prime. It's called The Third Wife, and her name is Ash Mayfair. So you can watch her movie on Prime.
Amazing. Okay, so we'll share that with our listeners as well. Is there any chance of your book being adapted into a movie, or would you want that?
Yes, I would want that, but only if my sister was the one to direct it.
Yep. You already have
this is
like I think this is a very specific and very personal story, and I think she's the only one that can really understand the emotional density, and also add more in terms of like her vision and her objectivity as my sister and as an artist. So she's started adapting it into a screenplay. Like, she has like the first draft, and she's been pitching it to several producers. So we don't know what will happen, but it's
watch the space.
Yeah.
Very cool. And having a debut novel that is so personal to you. You talked about feeling vulnerable in writing classes. What was it like publishing that and releasing it to the world?
I guess, the world is so big, and it's just a sea of strangers, and that somehow doesn't affect me as much as like, what my mom would think reading it,
Right.
or, just very personal connections. And so, but then I kind of realized too that I'm willing to deal with anything to put this book out in the world, like no matter how difficult, how much it will affect me. I didn't really think too much of the consequences. It's been an obsession of mine to write a novel and to publish it, that I just wanted it to happen so badly that I would be willing to do anything.
Mm-hmm. What was most important for you to tell in this story?
I think I wanted to convey that a lot of beauty can come out of loneliness, and a lot of beauty can come out of pain. Yeah, I think I wanted to convey that.
Are you working on anything new?
Yeah, I have a second novel that I just finished editing. It's going to go out on submission probably by the end of this month. So I don't know what will happen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about it, or is that off the table
Secret.
for now?
Oh, no, I can talk about it. So it follows three characters. It's basically three reincarnations of one love story. So it shows three people throughout three different reality, and like what is different in each of them. And it's a lot based on my upbringing in Eastern philosophy, and in the belief of reincarnations, and the belief that the belief of fate, and like who we're meant to fall in love with and who we're meant to be with. And so it plays around with the idea of like how the relationship could turn out differently each time.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds really intriguing.
Are you interested in switching genres, or do you think you'll mostly stay in like fiction, literary fiction kind of stories?
I would love to try other genre. Like I love ghost stories and I love speculative writing, like Black Mirror type of things. So I guess there's always going to be, and then I love poetry, I love graphic novels. So I consume a lot of different genres, but I don't know if I can like escape from who I am as an artist. So it's like, even if I'm trying to write, something that's like very specifically genre, I think my writing will just redirect me into the way that I always write.
Well, a lot of the genres you're mentioning, there's a lot of crossover. Like there's a lot of speculative lit fiction, and
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like Margaret Atwood is very much in that camp.
Yes, and I love her work. So
yeah,
it's like this question came out of me at the end, but I'm just wondering, because I know writing courses and MFAs, some people are kind of hesitant to get into programs like that. What's your perspective on it? Did you find it valuable? Do you think only certain people would maybe find it more valuable than others? What's your perspective on taking a course like that?
Sure. I mean, it is a financial commitment. So, it's tough for me to say, but from my experience, I feel like while I was going through it, I didn't appreciate it that much. While I was going through it, I think I struggled, and there was so much like competition within the program. But then afterwards, like I realized what I gained from it, which is like all these connections with like, very established authors and the friendships I made. And then also as a debut author, you need to acquire endorsement, for example, like blurbs for the whatever. And I don't know how an author that hasn't gone through an MFA program would do it. I guess like the publishers will help them with it. But a lot of my endorsement is like professors that have already read my work. So, obviously there are those that I ask and then they didn't have time and they turned me down. But at least I had somewhere to go. Like I knew that I could ask them.
And this occurred to me just now as well. Oh, yes. I wanted to ask you if you have any part to play in the marketing and promoting of your novel, or is that mostly handled by your publishing house?
It's mostly handled by Europa. For me, I do like everything I can with social media.
Okay.
So I just try to have, a social media presence. But yes.
Do you engage a lot with your readers?
I try to, but I also try to like keep a healthy amount distance from social media.
Can be a hole, a black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually I don't know if engaging with people all the time on social media, like I don't know if that's good or bad, because I also want the novel to exist on its own terms. Like I don't really want to
Answer questions about it after?
no, like
No?
no, like I just I don't want to be like too attached to it. Like it has its own life and I want to move on.
Okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Do you read your own reviews or do you avoid that?
I avoid it, but I also do read it.
Yeah.
I think I would
Yeah.
want someone else to do it for me and just read the
Yeah.
nice ones.
Yeah, I have like so little self-control when it comes to that. I don't know why I do it to myself. I think it's like whipping yourself or something. It's just like endurance.
I suspect that's one of the things that you get better at the more that you write. I'm sure with a debut, I don't know how people don't check
I know.
what people are saying.
Yeah, I really admire people that don't, but it's not possible for me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So we have the last question that we like to ask everyone. What have you been loving lately? It can be a book, a movie, TV show, anything that you think more people should check out.
Lately, I've been loving this work by David Mack, who is a graphic novelist. And I found his work quite by accident, but my sister found it, in the Strand. But then later we tried to find more of his work and we couldn't find it anywhere. So his work is quite hard to get to, but he's a brilliant graphic novelist that I think is kind of underrated. He has an established following, but I think the people that follow him know him from being the artist for Marvel, but then he has his own work that I think is way more amazing than the other stuff that he's famous for. So
that's a good one. Okay,
what's the title of the?
So it's the Kabuki series, Kabuki.
Okay,
I haven't heard of this before, and I
neither have I.
need
You
to
love
have more
novels?
graphic novels in my life.
Yeah, and his stuff, I think it's just art. Like I can't even really call it a graphic novel. It's so unpredictable. Like every page is unpredictable.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And where can our listeners find you? What are your social media handles?
Oh, sure. So at Abbigail Rosewood, Abbigail with 2 B's on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. And I'm kind of on Twitter, but not really.
Okay.
I'm at AN Rosewood on Twitter, but I don't really use it that much.
Okay, excellent. Well,
Thank
we're
you so much,
recording this
Abbigail.
in January, so we'll include your link to the book that goes live in Canada next week. So everyone in Canada will be able to read it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in purchasing Abigail's book or seeing her book trailer, which we highly recommend, it's really great, make sure to check out her blog. Or if you're interested in growing how to grow your sales, visit KoboWritingLife.com.
This episode was produced by Stephanie McGrath and Joni DiPlacido. Music was provided by Tearjerker. Editing was done by Kelly Robotham. And big thank you to Abigail Rosewood for guesting on our podcast today.
If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.